Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome to the next episode of Breaking Into Breaking Bad with Clifford and Caleb Humphrey. Today we are discussing Season 4, Episode 5, Shotgun. For those of you who have not seen this episode in a while, I'll give you a little reminder of what happens. So we left off the last time with Jesse being what appears to be something like kidnapped by Mike, and Mike is driving him out of the town. And they led us on for a while in this episode to believe that Mike really is going to just take him out somewhere in the desert, kill him, and bury him in the sand. But turns out it's a lot less dramatic than that. And what's revealed gradually is that for some reason, Jesse is going along with Mike on a daily run to pick up money that's been dropped in secret places all over the region. And so they just drive all day long and pick up money. And Jesse is under some kind of illusion that he is kind of being promoted from lab assistant guy to guard of Mike. And there's a scene towards the end where it looks like someone comes to attack them, and Jesse saves the day through an act of heroism. And we really think that Jesse did that, and he's just in his estimation of himself as a hero. And he's filled with a new sense of pride, and he's looking forward to doing that more often with Mike. And then it's revealed that Gus actually arranged and orchestrated the entire thing as a way, presumably, to get Jesse out of the danger zone of apathy that he was in, to being kind of excited about the work and feeling important. So that's the main thing that's going on. The second thing that really is important that happens in this episode is that we learn that Hank was completely convinced that Gale was Heisenberg, and that his trail that he's been following for so long really ended with Gale's murder, and Hank is ready to close it up and to find closure, as he says. And then Walt finds a way to decide, for whatever reason, that he suggests that that's not the case, and that maybe the real Heisenberg is still out there. So that's the other sort of major thing that happens in this episode. It's called Shotgun. Seems pretty clear why, because Jesse is riding shotgun with Mike throughout the whole episode. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's a greater significance.
The only other thing I could think of is when the two guys come and approach Jesse from behind. Yep. One of them is carrying a shotgun, but other than that, I can't think of anything else.
That's right. Yeah, presumably to rob them, and he saves the day. Right, it is a shotgun. Yeah, I think those two things. I don't think there's really anything else to it. So the introduction, it's one of the fun ones, right? So there's different kinds of introductions in this show. There's the weird ones that you can't. They're out of left field. It's like the two Salamanca brothers crawling in the dirt on their suits. You're just left scratching your head, right? What is going on? And then there's the others that are like this one. There's the other type that's like the commercial for Pollos Hermanos. It's just kind of funny, lighthearted, and it tells a little bit of a story. This is the kind where you're just thrown immediately into the thick of some really intense action scene. And it's Walt driving through what looks like not downtown Albuquerque, but a busy trafficked area. And he's dodging cars left and right and going just pell-mell. And he's on the phone trying to talk to Saul, and says, look, just make sure that she gets all of it, or something like that. And it seems pretty clear he's thinking, when I die, make sure that all my money goes to Skylar. And then he calls Skylar and leaves a voicemail that's like, honey, I just wanted to say I love you and was thinking about you and the kids. And like, he is under the belief that his life is about to end. And like, I'm wondering, is it because he thinks he's going to crash at some point? Because it definitely looks like he's going to crash at some point.
The cool part about that opening scene is you didn't know if that's if it was going to show like a flashback, or if this was the actual beginning of the scene,
Yeah,
or
right.
what was going on the first time you see this. So in your mind, you're like, wait, what happened last episode for him to be just driving like a maniac right now? Obviously as it goes on, you see he was under the impression that obviously that Jesse was either killed or about to be killed, and he was next, and his bluff had only gone so far with putting up with Gus. So it was pretty intense for sure.
Yeah. And then you're right. We don't know when it is, because normally when the intro is done, it will change to a different time. But what's interesting here is that when the intro is done, it picks up right where the intro left off, and Walt's still driving pell-mell through the town. And then he pulls into Pollos Hermanos. Gracie recognized Gus's car in the parking lot. I would definitely not have recognized Gus's car in the parking lot. A Volvo station wagon, a kind of
right
normal car, not a kingpin kind of car. And Walt goes there and is demanding to talk to Gus, and he believes that Gus is there because his car is there, and he's sitting there and nothing happens. And then he gets a call from Mike, and Mike says, hey, I got, what are you doing, Walt? Get back to the lab, start cooking. He's like, oh, where's Jesse? He's like, oh, he's right here with me. And Jesse's pretty clueless too but Jesse's still in his apathetic mode. So he's like, I don't know, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know where we're going. And it's clear Walt's like, well, why didn't you think to ask?
Right.
And so he knows he's not going to get anywhere with Jesse. So he's asked to speak to Mike again, and Mike's just like, look, everything's fine. You need to know, you're on a need to know basis, and you don't need to know what's happening here. So just get back to the lab. And then
which was
Walt does.
Well, right, but it was so belittling for him because it made him feel like kind of a peon again. Like when it was just him and Jesse, even though they were small potatoes, they were still, El Capitan. They ran the show. Right. Now, like a need to know basis, just Walter, just go back to the lab type thing. It's just not sit well with him at all.
Right. Yeah. We have to figure out what was it about. Maybe it was that belittling, something about what happens there in the lab and the whole experience. They go from there that evening to Hank and Marie's house for dinner. And Walt is in a very strange mood. He's wanting to get drunk. Right? He's pouring himself big glasses of wine, and then like, hey, do we got any more bottles? And they're like, yeah, there's one in the kitchen. Why don't you bring it in? And he just opens it up in the kitchen, pours himself a big glass, pours himself another, and Hank's like, hey, what are you doing? It's pretty clear Walt's in. I'm trying to think of the other times in the show when we've seen this Walt. Right? We've seen this Walt at his birthday. I think it was his birthday. No, not his. What was the party when he's at the pool and he's pouring drinks for Walter Jr.
Right.
And he's got this kind of.
That's when he in a weird way kind of lost his mojo. He was not cooking at the moment. Him and Jesse had kind of gone their separate ways, and the following episode is when Jesse shows up and was trying to
right. He throws the money at him. Right.
And you see this kind of feeling in Hank also. He kind of loses his sense of life with no Heisenberg to go after. And then once Walt brings up the idea that possibly the Heisenberg's still out there, he completely changes, and he's not a dick anymore to Marie. at the very end, he was just like, "Yeah, I'll have a cup of coffee, Marie," and they were back to normal. Like him and Walt both had this kind of sense of, if they don't have the meth
mission of some kind, or
then they just turn into total jerks.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, right. Okay, so this helps us understand, why has Hank been an unusually bad, big jerk for the last while? And
Right.
you could say it was because he was trying to accept the fact that he might be in a wheelchair the rest of his life. That's pretty tough.
Sure.
Maybe he was just in a bad mood for that reason. But you're right, he is kind of more cheerful and cheery and positive. Maybe he's just come to accept that. But I think it was really telling when Walter Jr. brings it up, says, "Hey, whatever happened with that?" And Hank says, "Yeah, like I'm done with that." He says, "I feel closure." And it sounded like psychological, like I've gotten psychological closure. And we remember how obsessed he was when he was tracking down Jesse and got pretty close. Yep. And so we're like, oh, well, that explains, to your point, that explains why you're like kind of a nice human being right now, because you've accepted, you've gotten closure with that whole chapter in your life. So this is, I think, a crucial scene, because let's not forget, why are they there? They're there to celebrate their purchasing of the car wash, right?
Right.
With their family. And so it's a time of sort of hope and, turning a new corner. And what does the car wash mean for Walt and Skylar? It means they've found a kind of legitimate way, or a way to appear very legitimate with their money. And they have a clear exit ramp. They can get all this money from that they're going to get from Walt's working for Gus, and then he can leave, and then all that money can be laundered through the car wash, and they can make money, and everything's going to look fine. So it was supposed to be the bow on all of this. And yet, what does Walt do? He gets a bomb and he just drops it right in the middle of that whole thing, because he hears Hank say, "Yep, I think Gus was Heisenberg, or Gale was Heisenberg, rather." He hears Hank say, I'm positive Gale was Heisenberg. And Walt could have said, "You know what? I'm good. Like, I get off scot-free now, because he's not going to keep looking for him." And that works perfectly with this car wash exit ramp plan to retire, easy retirement, time with the family, and all the things that we thought Walt wanted. And yet, in his sort of drunken stupor, he kind of says, "Well, frankly, I've seen those notes, and trust me, that's no genius. Maybe your Heisenberg's still out there."
Well, if you look at the beginning, Walt kind of does a smirk at first, and then when Hank starts really patting the ego, like, "Oh, this was a meth chef. This was the best meth out there, best meth cook out there." Like, he was just making Gale seem like this amazing person, and he could not let that go. At first, it looked like he could, like he did get off scot-free, and then he's like, "Whoa. Gale wasn't that good. You're wrong."
Right. So what's the what is going on inside Walt when Hank is singing Gale's praises?
Right. I mean, his pride has been his biggest downfall, but when you mix that into his current predicament with Gus and Mike and that whole thing, like, it just does not put him in a happy place. He does not feel like he is in charge of anything anymore.
Right. But so it's his pride that leads him to blow up his entire easy exit plan, alibi. Everything's explained. There's an answer for everything. And no one's going to keep digging for answers to questions.
Right.
If they think that Gale was it, then Hank is going to hang it up, and Hank's the bloodhound. He's the guy who's really going to keep going and try and find answers. So I think it's important for us to know how close Walt was to sort of getting away with it all. Right here in this moment at this dinner party, and he's the one who blows it up.
Did you see Skylar's face?
Yeah,
she didn't.
I did.
She didn't
She's
really know
pissed.
anything about Gale and the connection, but now she knows. Well, she has a very strong inclination that
he's Heisenberg.
That Gale, because he was talking about the whole copy thing, and that this was a partner of his.
Yeah.
And if he died, then maybe they are not in this safe environment that they thought that Walt was, saying. What did he say? Oh, I had a little disagreement with a coworker. Like, well, your coworker, one of them is dead now. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I don't think Skylar doesn't, we don't get to see like the next scene of them being home and Skylar being like, what the hell was that? Like, what?
Right.
So we don't know.
That'll be the next episode for sure.
Okay. Well, that's a good point to note. You get so angry at Walt. You're like, golly, man, you were so close. Why do you have to shoot yourself in the foot like that? But it just goes back to this. This is why this story, in a way, is a kind of classic tragedy where there's like the main character has a fatal flaw at the beginning, and the whole story is just like the working out of that flaw to the to a logical conclusion. And here we see it. It's the same thing that made him want to do the meth route instead of taking money from Elliot and Gretchen. Right? It's his pride. It's that same demon that led him to do that is the same one that's leading him to do this, to say, you know what, Hank, maybe you should keep looking around and don't give up the hunt yet. I'm wondering, okay, on one hand, Walt just doesn't want Gale to get the credit. But the only way that Walt can get the credit is if Walt also gets the blame for everything. And he'd rather get the blame if it means he gets the credit.
Right.
That's what he's saying in this.
Yeah,
moment.
That's a really good point, because you can't have one without the other. And he started out with just trying to get one, but now it's obvious that this is going to just go down a path where he's just going to find out that if you get one, you're going to get the other. So it's interesting. I never thought about that from that point of view.
Okay, well, maybe I guess we'll move on, just having noted the significance of that one scene,
right,
for the rest of the thing. So just to go dip into Jesse's life, he's bored out of his mind once he realizes that he's not going to die, and Mike's got to know that he's thinking that, and he just lets him for a while when he grabs the shovel the first time.
Yeah, what was the whole point of being so suspicious? Like, why not say it from the get-go?
Gus just told Mike, this is what you're going to do. And Mike probably was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to drive around with this loser,
Right.
So he probably didn't feel like I have to explain myself or give him.
Yeah, and I guess it just wouldn't go along with Mike's personality to just say up front, this is what's going on. More like, just wait and see, kid.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jesse's bored and nothing's happening except Jesse's starting to realize or to think that he's being promoted, or that Gus or somebody recognizes in him these skills and the abilities to be able to protect a guy like Mike. And so, it gets to the point where he tells Mike, hey, I understand. I'm what does he say? I'm your guy. And Mike's like, he's like, I had a guy. He's like, you're not my guy.
Yeah.
Trust me, you're not my guy. And in a way, I'm thinking he kind of, like, in hindsight, he kind of almost blows the story, blows the cover. Like because the idea was to make Jesse think that he was his guy. And then he gets to do this heroic thing as his guy. But if I'm Jesse and Mike tells me that, I'm wondering, okay, why am I here then? If I'm not here because I'm a guard, I'm either being babysat or something else, like something belittling, not something that's going to make me feel good. And the whole point was to try and make him feel good and important, right. Which is what works in the end, when Jesse is able to thwart what looked like a robbery.
Right. If we compare him to that scene of when he finally meets up with Mike and explains the heroic thing he did, compare that to the end of the last episode where his money was stolen, his house was destroyed, and he just did not care at all. It definitely worked.
Yeah. And I wonder what it says about Jesse's soul and personality and all of that. Like, what is it that he wants most in life? I mean, if Walt is defined in a way primarily by pride, what is the thing that defines Jesse?
Yeah.
You'd think you'd have to think it'd be something like, he, to kind of go Freudian or something, like he lacks a father figure who can tell him he's proud of him, something like that would make him want to strive in life, because before that he's not striving at all. And he's still, even when he's back in the lab and he's just finishing up, he's like, yeah, I'm going with Mike tomorrow. He's playing it really cool. He's like, yeah, like I do this from time to time now. This is kind of what I do. He's not like he's not like a puppy dog. Like, oh man, this is so great. Like I get to go, hang out with Mike. You know what I mean? Like he reminds me of an adolescent kid. Like, yeah, playing it super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Because I go do this sometimes. I go and I guard Mike.
Yeah. Well, did you see how he was standing at that one pickup, like by the car, and Mike's like, "You don't have to do that."
Oh yeah, right. It looks like he's looking around. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, a very clever move by Gus to try to protect his asset in Jesse. Like, I don't think he's necessarily doing it for Jesse's good, but he knows Jesse has become a real serious problem. Because he's going to make a mistake, he's going to get caught, and he doesn't appear to have any reason not to tell the cops on everybody else to get himself out free. So Gus believes, evidently, Walt when Walt tells him, if you don't have Jesse, you don't have me.
Right.
So Gus is being smart and dealing with Jesse in a way that works. Okay, so back with Walter and Skylar. That was interesting when they listened to the voicemail, and we are left. I mean, I don't know how it was for you, but when I see her listen to the voicemail, I'm thinking, oh, she's going to put two and two together and realize he left that voicemail because he thought he was going to die in that moment. The next scene is them making love, like passionately, it's like, wait a minute, you bought that? I mean, I don't think he was being disingenuous. I think he really meant what he said in the voicemail, but she didn't read anything below what the words were, So for her, it was just this like burst of sentimentality from Walt that was a turn on for her, and she loved it, and she's feeling very hopeful about where things are, and she tells him like, no more secrets, and he's like, oh yeah, absolutely not. Like, we're on the same page here, and we're just thinking, oh gosh.
I know, and they haven't been this close since before, like season 1, probably.
Right,
and for her to hear that voicemail and look at him just like, oh man, this caring, thoughtful man is back to normal. no more
Right.
secrets. Of course not, no, definitely not.
Well, and she's thinking like there's no reason left to lie. Like I know all about it now, and I'm invested in the lie, so might as well be honest and like let's just go forward. And maybe a question for us to ask is, do we think that Walt is telling himself, yeah, no, let's do that. Let's be honest. Like I'll just be honest with you. Or is he lying? Like, you know what I mean? Is he lying to himself? Or is he like, yeah, of course, no, I'm never going to tell like what's really going on, because she'd freak out if she knew. I don't know. Walt's kind of hard to read in that moment. I think he's got like his fingers crossed behind his back when he's like, absolutely, yeah, going forward.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, because he was pouring on the wine, so depending on how much he remembers.
True.
From this, but. A lot will be able to be said in the next episode for sure.
Right. Now, I don't know how significant this is, because we probably won't know for another episode or two, but she invites him to move back in. What if you move back in? And he doesn't answer. And we're left wondering like, whoa, wait, Walt, that's what you've wanted since this whole thing started. Right. She's offering again a chance, an on-ramp to like get back on the way things were, and he doesn't answer. He evades. And then he learns from Walter Jr., Mom said you're moving back on Tuesday. And he's like, wait, I'm definitely moving back, and it's on Tuesday? Like, I never said that, So that tells me that old Skylar, who's sort of arranging everything for Walt, is back. And we're not sure how the Walt now is going to take it.
Exactly, because it's another thing that was out of his control that he did not have a say over.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then there's that part too when it flashes down and we see Walter Jr. drinking out of the Beneke mug.
Right. Yeah.
Which was a really interesting touch from the producers, directors perspective. Yeah. I thought that was just like a small detail that really said a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed when we were back in Hank and Marie's house, we get a glimpse of Marie's wedding, like a portrait of her wedding dress.
It's a purple, right?
Freaking purple.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, again, another Vince Gilligan, like little detail. Like they didn't need to go through the trouble of getting a picture of her, framing it and putting it in there in purple. It's really, I got to think there's some symbolism there that I haven't picked up on yet. And there's way.
So much. It's so much.
Unless it's just a joke, like a really funny, like never going to get tired of being funny joke. Like she must always be in purple and everything about her house must be in purple. And let's just see how far we can go with this.
The wine opener was purple.
The wine was purple.
The wine opener. There you go.
I think that's it. We've got some big questions.
Well, the ending was pretty important.
Okay.
When it shows Hank,
yeah,
going through and being like, what does this vegetarian have Pollos Hermanos thing in his lab book?
And of course, we know he would never have picked that notebook up again had not Walt planted that seed of doubt in his mind.
Right.
So we'll have to leave it there.
Yep.
See what happens next time. But I mean, it's sort of like we thought that we were at the last chapter, and then nope, it's just the end of this book, and then there's a second book coming out. I mean, like it's a whole new thing opening up before us. So
gotta love it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for listening. If you like this episode, we ask that you do us a solid and share it with somebody else. Put it on a social media. We are on Twitter. We are on YouTube. We are on Patreon. You can find us there at Breaking Into BB. And we would like to hear from you. So if you've got any comments, we would appreciate to hear from you there. And if you rate us, even just giving us 5 stars, you don't have to even say anything. That would help us out a lot with the algorithms. We would appreciate it. So this is Clifford and Caleb Humphrey signing off from another episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time when we break into the next episode of Breaking Bad.
See y'all later.
you.